for the very last of the Resistance.
We need Luke Skywalker.
I'm not coming back.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
That was a cheap move.
We need you to bring the Jedi back. Kylo Ren is strong with the Force.
What do you know about the Force?
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Ah, Skywalker, missed you have I.
Oh, they hate that ship! Come on!
The rebellion is reborn. The war is just beginning. And I will not be the last Jedi.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
You know, on occasion, I think about not doing, like, 2 intros, but I feel like the show can't start unless I do the official one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
And besides, the music right there just guts me, like, every single time.
To you.
May the Force be with us.
My nerd road.
Just let it in.
Ojaba. Why does she get a blaster and I don't? Ojaba.
All right, so this is totally behind the scenes and information that's not necessarily relevant to the show and when you listen to it. But this week's show is actually being broken up into several different sections, okay? I'm recording this part on Tuesday. I don't get to do the show, or I don't normally do the show until the weekend arrives. Usually Saturday or Sunday is when I sit down to record the My Nerd World Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice. I'm glad you're with me once again this week. However, I needed to get this portion of it sort of done now, so you got my fresh and instinctive reaction, because that sound right there, yeah, that's me tapping my steel case copy of Star Wars: The Last Jedi on Blu-ray, and I'm so excited. So I did what I don't normally do, or I try not to do, because I'd like to go physically to the store and purchase these. And I've had really, really bad luck of ordering stuff online, and slow to adopt that. But I did with The Last Jedi. I had a bunch of certificates for Best Buy, because I'm a rewards member, so I ended up I splurged and got the full fancy 4K Blu-ray edition in the steel case. And I like to mention when I repeat things, but I mentioned this on last week's show, that my Star Wars Blu-ray collection is kind of all over the map in terms of casing. I have the Blu-ray Complete Saga, and then I've got the Rogue One Special Edition from Target. It's the big packaging. And then I've got the Target sort of Digipack. It's like a cardboard pack for the Force Awakens. And I opted for the Steelbook for The Last Jedi because I really liked the artwork. On the front, they use the light side, if you will, of the artwork they did for the big standee. I think they also use this for the IMAX poster. And then the back of it is the left hand, is the dark side for the big movie standee. And it just looks amazing. I've actually cleared out a spot on my shelf to put it, so it's been waiting. So I'm not going to put it up there yet, because I'm going to go and watch it again. But I wanted to share my instinctive reaction, because these are special moments for Star Wars fans. Like I talked about, I got it in my hand now. And it's funny because, not funny like haha, but more like interesting funny. It's interesting because looking at the artwork and holding this in my hand, the only other Star Wars movie that gives me the feels of thinking about it and wanting to watch it and the depth is The Empire Strikes Back. Jedi Mind Trick had that fantastic comment last week when he was comparing it to that. And while I'm moved on from ranking these films, there are films that hold a certain reverence, right? They just have a different importance to us. And I think there are movies there are movies that exist now that will change and they will go up for me in terms of enjoyment and in terms of how much I respect them. And I think it's just going to take time, even though many of them have already been out for a while. I'm talking about the prequels. The Last Jedi has already done that for me. The poster for The Empire Strikes Back, the very Gone with the Wind-esque poster that's got Luke on the Tauntaun and Han over Leia while she's, sort of dipped down, and it's got the ice on the front. That poster, for a poster, gives me all the feels. I've got it sitting right next to where I sit for my entertainment area. It's right there next to me, and just looking at it, it evokes so many of those memories and those feelings. The Last Jedi is already doing that for me. I'm looking at the cover of this, and I can't wait to go. And I don't think I'm going to be able to sit down and watch the whole thing. It is the middle of the week, and I have other things I have to do. But I can't wait to sit down and watch it. And I actually have the Last Jedi poster up kind of at an angle where it's in a bad spot where my entertainment room is, because I'm the only one that could enjoy it. But then again, the rest of my family doesn't sort of hold it in such high regard as I do. I just wanted to make sure that I got on Tuesday, and I took a few minutes to share with you my my fandom and my excitement of owning the physical copy of this movie. It almost makes me want to go out and splurge and get a 4K TV, but I'm a wiser man than that. And I'm a big TV audiophile. I have been told that when it comes to picture quality, and I could be told wrong, but I have read online that when it comes to picture quality, if you're looking at a screen that's like 60 to 65 inches and 1080p, once you get like 8 feet away from the screen, the eye can't tell the difference between what you're seeing between 1080p, Blu-ray, and the new 4K HD. I don't know if that's true or not. That's the excuse I'm using for not upgrading. Eventually I will. But so far, The Last Jedi is the only one that I have in 4K Ultra HD. And it does have the Blu-ray in here and the special features as well. The only thing that I wish the package had, the steel case, because again, the case itself is just absolutely gorgeous. The only thing that I kind of wish it had was some kind of booklet. I would have liked that, just as an addition. It's okay that it doesn't. I mean, I own the books. I have the visual dictionary. I have the art book. But just in terms of, something a little bit extra, it would be nice to have a booklet with it. But that's a real minor complaint. It really is just a great looking case, and the artwork is just fantastic. I mean, top to bottom, so much care put into this movie. And the artwork too, and I haven't talked about this on the show yet, but the artwork around, and I mean the promotional artwork, the posters, whether it's the IMAX posters, whether it's the theatrical posters, the international posters, there was really a lot of care put into these. And they did a much, much better job with the artwork, the promotional artwork around this movie, in my opinion, than they did with The Force Awakens. When you look at, like, I'm holding it side by side right now. I'm holding the cover to my Blu-ray Steelbook next to the theatrical poster of The Force Awakens here in my office, and there's no comparison. The Force Awakens poster is beautiful. I love the color palette. It really is. But it's also just a big Photoshop. There's like 16 characters on that poster. And there's a lot on this one too. But just the way that Rian Johnson, the care that Rian Johnson had of crafting a palette for this movie, down to the movie itself. You watch the documentary and you hear him talk about the color red and the importance of the color red. I mean, there is a level of artistry beyond normal filmmaking that Rian Johnson put into everything about this movie. Even to this point, and I keep forgetting to mention this, And 9 times out of 10, when I walk past my theatrical poster, I notice this, and I always say, oh, I got to mention this on the show, and I keep forgetting. But I finally remember. On the theatrical poster, first off, the first thing that caught my eye, and this is going to sound so goofy, the first thing that caught my eye and got me so excited for the theatrical poster of The Last Jedi was the inclusion of Kylo Ren's command shuttle from The Force Awakens. I adore that ship. I love vehicles. I love all the vehicles in the Star Wars universe. You can tell by looking at my office / studio / bedroom, because I got a lot of toys. I love the vehicles, and I loved from the moment I saw it, I loved Kylo Ren's command shuttle from The Force Awakens. Interesting side note on this. There was a huge shift in how that vehicle looked. And the reason I know this is because I've done a little background digging. When the first promotional material was released for The Force Awakens early on, there were some second and third tier posters and T-shirts available. And the T-shirts and posters that were available, promotional items long before the trailers came out and before the movie, and a lot of this stuff got leaked early. It showed Kylo Ren's command shuttle and all the original artwork right down to the toys. First, it was white. And not only was it white, but the wings stayed upright. So if you were to go back and look at the original promotional material for The Force Awakens, you can find photos of artwork done of Kylo Ren's black command shuttle in all white, and the wings are upright. Then later in the promotion of the movie, the ship became black, but the wings were still upright. They're upright on the die-cast toys. They're upright on all of the merchandising. They were upright on the snap-type models. I don't think that they originally intended those wings to fall out, or at least Disney, Lucasfilm didn't put that out in the artwork. I had thought for the longest time that this ship was going to be really unique and that those big, huge, gigantic wings were going to stay upright. And I thought it was a really unique and interesting design choice. It wasn't until we got the first batch of trailers when you see, oh, those wings actually fold out, which makes it look... Actually, I'm looking at it right now. I've got the toy right here in front of me, which makes it looks even cooler. To the point where when they made the die-cast Hot Wheels die-cast toy of the vehicle for The Last Jedi, they actually make the wings fold out. When you buy the one from The Force Awakens, the wings don't fold out. They stand upright. So I'd had an affinity for that ship because I just think it's a gorgeous ship. I think it's really ominous. And one of the things that I like about the films is that they usually, you have these ships that you see from movie to movie to movie. They're very iconic vehicles. And I felt that vehicle was very iconic, but I had no expectation whatsoever, especially when I found out that there was going to be a TIE silencer that, Kylo Ren was going to be flying his own fighter. I thought for sure, oh, well, that's the last that we're going to see of the command shuttle. So when the poster first arrived and I saw it on the poster, I was so excited for a really silly thing, but I really was. What's really unique about it, though, if you get a chance, look at the poster. And again, this is dumb. I just think it's cool. The way they positioned the shuttle on the poster, they kicked the nose up a notch. It's not like sitting dead on. Like they did it at an angle, and it just creates just such a cool visual shot of that ship on the poster. It makes it way more dynamic than just looking at it straight on and seeing the silhouette basically it creates. By taking the ship and pitching it upwards, it really creates a much, much better effect and gives you a better and a more dynamic, to use that word again, visual of that ship. I just thought that was so cool. And then not to mention the fact that it's used in the movie in such a way that really highlights it. There's the one shot where it's floating there over Crate before they fire on Luke when he walks out from the door that had been blown open. That's all burning behind him. and you get that outside shot, and you see everybody in the cockpit of the ship. Every time it's again, of so many favorite moments. It's such a fantastic moment for me because I love that ship so much, and here we actually have a scene taking place inside this ship. And one of the things that I would love to ask Rian Johnson, if I ever had the chance to interview him, and I may have mentioned this before, but I'll say it again since I'm on the topic of Kylo Ren's command shuttle, which oddly enough is not featured on my steelbook. I'm looking at it right now. His TIE silencer is, which I also love. I've got the huge version, toy version of that right over here behind me, along with my Rey Praetorian Guard and Ben Solo over there. Anyways, one of the things that I would ask Rian Johnson is at the end, when Kylo Ren goes to confront Luke, when the ship lands, when his command shuttle lands on the surface of Crate, the wings don't come down. And in The Force Awakens, every time it lands, the wings kind of pop in and then they slide down. I just kind of assumed it was like magnetic, right? And it happens at the very beginning of the film when they land at Laura Santeca's village. It happens on Takodana. The wings fold up, they land, and they whoop, whoop, and they come down, and then when they take off, they come back up and they slide back into place. In The Last Jedi, they stay upright. They stay full and upright. And it really sets that shot and makes it look so much better. That ship just looks ominous sitting there with the wings fully erect, if you will, sitting on the ground. And I would love to ask Rian Johnson how much of that was a conscious choice to make in that moment, to not have them shrink down in size and to leave them up. If I had to guess, I'd have to say that Rian Johnson made that specific choice because it looked better. It could be that it just was simpler to not have to animate that. I think personally it makes that shot. Not that it wouldn't have been great otherwise, but when you step back and you look at how that whole shot is framed with the background and the walkers, and then Kylo coming out and Luke there, and then having the wings and the ship there, it just looks absolutely fantastic. One more quick point on that shot, by the way. The moment when Luke walks out to face Kylo Ren before they fire on him, and you see all the walkers, big and small, and you see Kylo Ren's ship there. It has this. The whole background has this very distinct sort of brown orange sunset going on. I have it's a huge folder. And in this folder, it's from the 80s. In this folder are these massive rectangle pieces of art. I mean, it's probably like half a foot tall and maybe a foot and a half wide. I mean, these are big pieces of art. Almost as if somebody had taken, like if you took a letterbox image from a screen, a widescreen image, it's like that, or like your Facebook banner, but they're big. I mean, we're talking, again, like a foot and a half by half a foot. And in it, it's all the Ralph McQuarrie art from The Empire Strikes Back. I guess I should have noted that. It's all the artwork from The Empire Strikes Back. A bunch of it that Ralph McQuarrie did. And they put it in this special envelope for collectors, and it's just these really beautiful pieces of art in this folder. I'd love to get them all framed one day. One of them, and a lot of it's concept art. One of them is a shot of the Imperial probe droid on Hoth, but instead of having a white and blue background, he did sort of the sunset motif, and it's got this orange background and sort of a brownish tint to it, with the walker sort of going across the snow, floating. They used that as a reference to light and color that shot. That specific piece of art was what they were inspired by to make the iconic shot at the end of the movie on Crate when Luke walks out to face Kylo Ren. And again, just another example of the attention to detail and the artistry that Rian Johnson poured into this movie. All right, so there'll be more to come, obviously, because you'll be listening to it. This is Tuesday, and then I'm going to record the rest of the show this weekend. Before I wrap up this portion and we get to some of the news that's piling up this week, and I'll have further thoughts on The Last Jedi, the Blu-ray, as well, and again, as well as whatever items and news items take place between today and this weekend. One thing that I want to bring up is, because it's fresh in my mind, I was watching Collider Movie Talk, and Mark Hamill came out I don't know who he was being interviewed by, and he made a comment that George Lucas and his original intention for Episode 9, because he had done these, sort of these drafts, this outline of what Episodes 7, 8, and 9 were supposed to be. And it's, famously been talked about how Disney and Lucasfilm tossed his ideas aside, although we have begun to find out that a lot of the ideas that he had still did exist. Lineage there, Luke being a broken man, off in isolation. These are all things that George Lucas, these are all ideas that Lucas had come up with. Lucas told Mark Hamill at some point that his intention for Episode 9 was that Luke wasn't going to die in 8. He would die in 9 after having trained Leia. Okay? And Mark Hamill continues to talk about how he fundamentally disagrees with the way Rian Johnson handled his character. Here's a couple things that I want to mention about this. One, Mark Hamill, if you've paid attention at all to the comments that Mark Hamill has made about all of Star Wars, whether it's the prequels, whether it's the original trilogy, and certainly the comments that he's made about his disagreement with Rian Johnson. A lot of the ideas that Mark Hamill has put forward, I'm just going to be blatant here, I'm just going to be blunt, they sucked. He had ideas back with the Return of the Jedi of things that he wanted to do for the character, and they weren't very good ideas. I mentioned this on last week's show. I think Mark Hamill is more of the type where he wants to go and appeal and do this for fans. And as a matter of fact, I believe in that interview he said as much. He says, aren't we supposed to be making this for fans? And Rian Johnson was, well, no, we're not making this for fans. We're giving them something new. We're giving them something different. As a radio talk show host veteran, I've been doing radio for 21 years. Again, if I try to go out there and do a show that I think the listeners want to hear, it's not going to be good, because I'm not going to be talking about what I care about and what I want to talk about. And it's the same principle as if you go and watch a documentary over a subject that doesn't really interest you, but the person that's talking about it is really, really into it, and they're really enthused by it. And you are enthused because they are enthused. You're going along for the ride because the person who's telling the story is obviously really, really passionate about it, right? It's authentic and it's genuine, and that's what's important, that genuine connection and emotion. And I tend to try to do the same thing when it comes to this show. I mean, look, for the most part, as of right now, the My Nerd World Star Wars podcast is me sitting down with a smattering of notes that I put down, and then for 45 minutes or so I go off and just talk about my love of Star Wars, and it comes from nowhere but my head and my heart. And thankfully, a lot of you have really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate it, and all the feedback. It's great, and I see the show growing, and I've got ideas about what I want to do with it in the future and how I can expand it when I have some more time to spend on it, and maybe bring in some other voices. So getting back to Mark Hamill, though, a lot of what he's talked about and what he suggested are not good ideas. They're fanboy dreams. And John Roca on Collider Movie Talk, he's one of the hosts, he made a comment that he was kind of tired of Mark Hamill making these comments and how it's not helping. At the moment that the fandom begins to sort of die down when it comes to The Last Jedi, Mark Hamill steps out there and makes another comment and gets everybody all riled up again. Mark Hamill's got a right to say whatever in the heck he wants to say. Do I feel like he's doing a disservice? Yes, I feel like he's doing a disservice. That being said, in the documentary, The Director and the Jedi, Mark Hamill was very keen to point out in that documentary where he went and said, hey, I don't agree with what Rian Johnson is doing, but it's not my story. They're not my characters. I'm just, they're just renting me out. And I will give everything I can to make this enact in the best ability that I can to make Rian Johnson's vision come to screen. And he did, and that's what's most important. Unfortunately, if you look at the comments on the clip from Collider about them talking about this Mark Hamill story, it is just raft with all these fanboys just butt-sore and hurt over this whole thing. I just shake my head and go, boy, it must suck to be you. Because I'm sitting here, I've been talking for 24 minutes, how excited I am that I've got a case in my hand with the Blu-ray for The Last Jedi, even though I've had the digital copy sitting on my Xbox One now for 2 weeks, and I have watched a really good copy of it. It doesn't matter. I have it in my hand, and I'm so excited about that. So I just wanted to mention that. It was top of mind. one of the news items for this week. I'm sure there'll be more when I record the rest of the show and what you'll hear here in a few minutes. So one more quick item, because I was planning on doing this on the show anyways, and since I'm here and it's top of mind, I'll go ahead and I'll mention it now. I would like some feedback from you. And again, thank you so much to everybody who's been writing in. Been getting so much feedback, and I really love doing the listener feedback portion of the show. The question that I have, though, is it usually ends up being that I get about 40 to 45 minutes worth of content, and that's usually the length of the show. But the listener portion of it has been taking about another half hour or so, and I'm totally fine with doing it all in one podcast and having like an hour and a half podcast. My goal is to usually keep the show within like an hour. So my question to you is, and I'd love to get your feedback, is whether or not you're cool, and what do you prefer? You prefer to have it all in one longer, once-a-week podcast, or would you prefer it split up into two podcasts? One that is sort of commentary and news items, and then a separate show that I could post that would be nothing but listener feedback. It's something that I want to continue doing, and now that I'm getting such a great response from you, it's becoming, again, something that I wasn't expecting was going to be taking up as much time, and thankfully it is. So, drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Drop me a comment on YouTube. This is where I've been pulling all these comments from. And one, continue to give me your thoughts about the show, suggestions for topics or questions you have for me. But also, when you do comment, please let me know what it is that you kind of would prefer. And, you know, this is one of those moments where it's okay to reach out to the audience and find out what you want. But I'm very curious to see if there's any kind of consensus on whether or not it should be one longer podcast of, you know, an hour and a half roughly, or two maybe 40-minute podcasts, one of news and commentary and one of listener feedback. Or just have it all in one complete package. So let me know what you think, and I'll kind of get a consensus and see where we go from there. I do have things planned for the show in the future. The show is not going anywhere. I have my full-time job, Monday through Friday, as a news talk host. But this is quickly becoming, and I mean, I've been doing 117 episodes, but I really do look forward to doing the show every single week. And when the opportunity arises and it's feasible, I'm hoping to do other types of shows and bring in other voices as the fandom expands with the talk of the Rian Johnson trilogy and the Game of Thrones series of movies and another animated show and the live action show. There's going to be no lack of content to discuss, and it's going to end up being more than will be able to be covered in a weekly show. So my intention down the line, and it may be a ways down the line, is to expand my nerd world and to have podcasts that cover all of these different creative this creative content that Disney and Lucasfilm is pumping out. So you guys are kind of sort of like on my ground floor, even though I've been doing this now for going on about 2 years and without any promotion. But I've got a nice audience going right now with you and a nice set of feedback and commentary coming back. And I know now that the show is on a path to where I want to take it and continue to grow it. And so that's a long way of me saying thank you. Please keep commenting. And again, let me know. 2 podcasts for the main show of a listener feedback or news and commentary, or just all in one show. Let me know. talkshownerd@gmail.com and drop me a comment on YouTube. All right, so I'm going to quit this portion of the show, and then we'll pick it back up here on the weekend and find out what we have to talk about then.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Now, before I get started on the news items for the show this week, I do want to mention up front that once there is Han Solo things to talk about, and then we'll talk about Han Solo, but there really hasn't been. I anticipate that this coming week, I know that Collider Jedi Council is supposed to be doing some event at a Denny's on either Monday or Tuesday, and so the promotion is going to get underway. I imagine we should be getting the full trailer very soon. As a matter of fact, Ron Howard, over the course of the past week, has gotten really busy on Twitter and Instagram, posting up different comments. An edit of Solo: A Star Wars Story is now locked. He tweeted out about the recording of the soundtrack, and then he also tweeted a photo of him watching the film, and it's a black and white picture of him watching the movie Solo: A Star Wars Story, and in the background on the screen you can see A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. But this all just so far has been a bit of a build-up to the full promotion of Solo: A Star Wars Story. So again, I imagine that probably by next week we'll have something to talk about in regards to that. But this is still the week of the release of The Last Jedi, and we have a couple of news items to get to, including a couple of articles I want to work through before I get to the listener feedback portion of the show this week. First off, and I believe this actually comes out of Deadline. Deadline.com put together the 2017 Most Valuable Blockbuster Tournament, and Star Wars, no big surprise, landed number one based off of its box office profits. The bottom line on The Last Jedi, according to Deadline, is this. When Bob Iger agreed to pay $4 billion for Lucasfilm, he probably didn't imagine that profit for the first three films, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rogue One, would earn back close to 40% of that purchase price, with collective profits of just over $1.5 billion. And it goes on to break down the profit for The Last Jedi compared to the profit of The Force Awakens, which was 46% less. But again, you're talking about a franchise that was coming back. It'd been 10 years since the last Star Wars movie, and typically the second movie in trilogies doesn't do nearly as well. It goes on to say, we can only imagine what the top 10 will look like if Disney inhales Fox, talking about the top 10 movies of the year, and adds its X-Men and other franchises to Disney's arsenal. Landing 4 films in the top 10 is illustrative of Disney's position as far and away the most dominant major movie studio we have ever seen in decades. And one quick point on that, too, is that with the current rate of content that Disney and Lucasfilm is creating surrounding Star Wars, I don't think they are going to be able to keep up with these types of numbers. Now, I could be proven wrong if you look at what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done. But this is going to take, and as I've talked about, I believe they are doing, this is going to take some very creative release schedules and moves within the fandom. Because as I firmly believe, and I think there's a lot, I think it's an easy comment to make, it's an easy belief to have, you know, the spin-off movies, Rogue One and your Solo: A Star Wars Story, they don't carry the same kind of weight and magnitude as the saga films do. And if we're wrapping up this trilogy with, or this 9-movie arc with 9, Disney and Lucasfilm are going to need to continue on and do more world and myth and character building so that we all have things to pontificate on. I mean, we're still talking about The Last Jedi, for crying out loud. We didn't spend even nearly this much time talking about Rogue One. And that's going to be fascinating to watch from the point of view of Rian Johnson's trilogy, and more than likely, but more so Rian Johnson's trilogy than the Game of Thrones dude's series of movies. You know, Rian Johnson's trilogy is going to probably be the closest thing that any of us have ever seen since the very first Star Wars film, when we were first introduced to these characters that we have now followed for the course of and will have of 9 movies. If, indeed, Rian Johnson is starting fresh with brand new characters in a part of the galaxy that's never been explored before, then the argument to be made there is the reason why he's doing it is to give us a new starting point with a new cast of characters that we can, and hopefully will, end up caring about as much as we did Han, Luke, and Leia, and subsequently Rey and Ben Solo. Finn as well, but really it's those two characters in that story. I like Finn as a character, but without, and Poe Dameron, but without having their attachment to the Force and, well, just that. It doesn't carry the weight as the other characters do. That's just the bottom line. There was also an article that I was going to share. Is Han Solo Star Wars spinoff spiraling towards disaster? It's not worth wasting my time or your time to go over. It's a lot of speculation about what this article writer believes has to happen, and talks about the director controversy and all that nonsense. I don't care anymore. I mean, I follow the news. It was interesting when Lord Miller got fired. It was interesting when Ron Howard got hired. But I don't care. I want to see the film on screen and then judge it when I go and see it on screen. I do have a couple of other articles here, though. Rian Johnson and Mark Hamill have both been making their rounds with the physical release of The Last Jedi out there. And I have an article here, Mark Hamill and Rian Johnson on Star Wars haters and critics in the age of social media. And it's a Q&A, and I wanted to share it with you. Hamill and Johnson spoke with CNN. This was at South by Southwest and the conference earlier this month, and talked about Luke's fate and what it's like to feel the criticism from Star Wars superfans in the age of social media. The following conversation, which contains major spoilers about The Last Jedi, has been edited for length and clarity. So there's a handful of Q&A of this that I wanted to share with you. So start off here. So what was it like to have Disney, the famously tight-running studio, give you the reins of the brand new, of the biggest brand in movie history? And Rian Johnson said it was scary in exactly the way you think it would be scary. My producer Ron Bergman and I came into it, and we were very used to working with indie films and having total control. But the truth is, Disney and Lucasfilm, I mean, they were good collaborators, but they really let us do our thing. Last Jedi did receive some criticism online, even in the Star Wars community. Mark Hamill responded, "Fancy that, criticism online, unheard of." Looking back, was any of the criticism fair? Johnson said no. Hamill went on to add, we were happy to ruin people's childhoods, obviously joking. Then Johnson said this. The thing is, no, in terms of, oh, wow, they're right, I should have done that, but fair in terms of every single Star Wars thing that comes out. Every fan has stuff that they love, stuff that they hate about it. Every movie has lovers and haters. Every single one going back to the originals. Hamill says, we were so lucky there wasn't social media when The Empire Strikes Back came out. And Rian Johnson went on to say, yeah, Empire would have totally gotten roasted. If you look at the criticism of The Last Jedi, can you imagine what they would have said about Luke just getting his ass handed to him by Vader? Oh my gosh. Hamill went, right. The hand getting cut off. We lost and Dad Vader. Han gets turned into a coffee table. Right? The article writer says. Hamill says, yes, exactly. In those days, you really had to take a lot of effort to sit down and say, dear Mr. Hamill, why did you turn Harrison Ford into a coffee table? That is not right. Now it's wallop and send. It's so easy. Pure hatred can be delivered directly to your home in a nanosecond. Johnson went on to say, but that's also the other side of the coin and what's great about Star Wars fans. Everyone is so passionate about it. And then Hamill says, they have such an investment in it, They feel they have a sense of ownership. And I totally get that. I feel the same way. Things don't always go the way I like them either. Now, is Luke gone? Are we going to see him ever again in 9, maybe as a Force Ghost or something like that? Hamill goes on to reiterate, doesn't know. It's totally up for J.J. Abrams. They asked Ryan if there was ever a version of the story where Luke didn't die. And Johnson said, it's not something where I was like, this has to be in the movie. It was something we got to organically. It was never like a mandate. It was a big thing. It was not something I ever wanted to do. I was not even something I decided, and that was it. It would be the easiest thing in the world to not kill Luke. You just don't fade him out at the end. You just don't leave him on the island. It would have been simple. It was something I gave lots of thought to all the way up to the very end of the process. Hamill goes on to say, "It's all right. I'm still in denial. I think I just force projected to another planet." To which Johnson said, "I like the idea that you appear at the beginning of 9 in modern-day New York." Hamill says, panhandling in front of Hooters. And look, to that, I don't have any problem with it. I know a lot of people have a problem with it. But, again, when you do side-by-side comparisons of these films with all the other movies, especially the original trilogy, I mean, can you even can you even imagine for a second Star Wars coming out with social networking the way that it is right now? I'm a big, big, big believer that everything happens for a reason. And the fact that we got Star Wars, back in the 70s when we did, thank the good Lord Almighty that happened back then. Because so many franchises, in my opinion, get killed, and good storytelling and interesting stories end up dying by the wayside, or people don't see them because of the word of mouth that gets spread on social media before the movie even has a chance to go and hit theaters. And I could run through a litany of movies that I could cite as examples that people have their preconceived notions of how these movies are going to be, Star Wars aside, and make an argument that a lot of movies suffer under the weight of fandom prior to their getting into the box office. There's a side argument, or there's a counter argument to that says, well, maybe that's making the content, the quality of the content, better than it was before, because studios would make better movies, knowing that they are going to get talked about and potentially negatively by the masses prior to their release. Maybe that is the case. As society, we haven't really gotten a good, firm grasp on how to deal with social networking. I know for me personally, it's a part of my job on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, but I have recently started walking away from my phone and my iPad and leaving them in my bedroom while I go and do my stuff around the house. Even when I go hop on the TV to play a video game or watch a movie or watch a TV show, usually I have my iPad next to me with notifications going off in case anything happens, and I've finally taken to putting that stuff aside and leaving it be because I need to break from all of it. I don't need to be that connected to the outside world, and maybe there's something to say that when I need to find out about something, I'll find out about something, and so now I don't need to find out about it the moment that it actually happens. And I certainly have taken to ignoring, and back to the original point, a lot of comments and commentary that are made on not just Twitter and Facebook, but also in podcasts as well. I've unsubscribed to so many podcasts in the past month or so, just because I finally realized that, no, I've only been listening to this because they talk about Star Wars and they may have had one good show, but I'm sick and tired of all the negativity that's surrounding this. All right, let's get back to this article here. Ryan, you have a new Star Wars trilogy coming up with Disney. There's diversity in front of the camera, but not so much behind it. Is that something that you want to pursue? Here's what Johnson had to say. Johnson said this: "My God, right now there are so many talented women filmmakers that I would love to see make a Star Wars movie, and directors of color, anything that I can do in the future going forward so that can happen. Believe me, I'm on that." The guy asking the questions never should have asked that question to Rian Johnson. He's not hiring or firing people that are to make Star Wars movies. He may be hiring staff to make the movies he's making, but he's not the one who's hiring directors. There's diversity in front of the camera, not so much behind it. Is that something that you want to pursue? He's not hiring anybody. Why don't you ask him when he has his own movie studio and he's actually hiring and firing directors? Okay, I'm just annoyed. All right, let's see here. Star Wars has been around for 40 years. What is at the heart of Star Wars that really moves people? Johnson said it's a combination of that mythic hero's journey, which is all really about going from childhood through your adolescence into adulthood. That's just something that all kids can relate to, jumping into a big, scary world and finding your place in it. And he elaborates beyond that to talk about the other things about Star Wars. That really is the point, though. And he's mentioned that many, many times about The Last Jedi, where if we're talking about this childhood, adolescence to adulthood, his movie, The Last Jedi, was part of that process. And even though at the end of the film, all of our leads are kind of at the same place at the start of the film, albeit the Resistance is now the Rebellion with fewer people involved. They've all gone through this change. They've all grown up in some way, shape, or form, right? All right, Star Wars writer and director Rian Johnson today, he admitted that he was freaked out by death threats from angry fans over the plot details of The Last Jedi. This comes out of the Standard UK. The latest episode of the Star Wars saga is a huge hit. Johnson told the Standard, "I knew intellectually that I was what I was letting myself in for, but when it happens, you're like, oh my God, this is intense. It's about knowing you're not going to please everyone, but then you still read someone saying they wish you were dead, and it's going to ruin your day." There were death threats. It's balanced by a few things. 90% of the stuff I got online was not only lovely and encouraging, but really thoughtful as well. Fans would send me essays on the movie. The other 10% is just loud and gets amplified. And look, I've dealt with people that have wished me dead. It's not a fun thing to have to go through, and it's a ridiculous thing to have to go through, especially if you're making a Star Wars movie, for crying out loud. He goes on to say, "At first I was freaked out. But then I realized the things that people were angry about, the things are the things that I'm most proud about it." Okay. Mark Hamill had voiced initial concerns about what happened to his character. Johnson said when Mark first read it, it was not what he expected. The truth is, though, this is normal, a working process for actors and directors. There are moments where the actors say, well, why would my character do this? And then it's a conversation. This was no different, but it gets shouted through a megaphone. Mark and I were both very respectful of each other. It didn't bother me that he spoke out about it, he said, in the behind-the-scenes documentary. The U.S. director hopes that there can be a return for Luke, despite his disappearance at the end of The Last Jedi. I am just an audience member now, so I'm looking forward to finding out what happens. Look, man, he's Luke Skywalker, so who knows? He started each day at work by doing a crossword puzzle, by doing a crossword on the game board in the Millennium Falcon, and he took everything that wasn't nailed down from the set. The creative guys gave me incredible realistic Porg I could control with levers. Prop guys gave me a set of lightsabers. Yeah, so, it's interesting to see in retrospect now, now that the physical release is out, now that we kind of have these final interviews that are out there now, with Rian Johnson and the cast and Mark Hamill, it's really, really interesting in retrospect to look at and compare all the promotion and release of The Force Awakens compared to The Last Jedi. If you wanted any example whatsoever on why The Last Jedi will be regarded as one of the best Star Wars movies, and I believe even better than The Force Awakens, all you have to do is look at, the past handful of shows that I've done, all the commentary around The Last Jedi, all the controversy. Look at the amount of money that it made, and look at how much conversation it sparked. I mean, it was a lot. The movie really, really made you think, and was incredibly deliberate in wanting to shake things up, not for the sake of shaking things up, but for the sake of the story in and of itself. And I'll continue to say it. I absolutely respect Rian Johnson for that. I watched The Last Jedi again yesterday, and I just continue to love this movie and enjoy this movie. And, much like the other films, there's portions of the film every time I watch it where it moves me in a little different way, or I like another portion of the film over a different portion, depending on the viewings. I remember this time watching it yesterday. For some reason, the whole end crate scene, from the moment that they arrive, and that gorgeous shot of Princess Leia looking out the big gigantic door on Crate to where the rebels were hiding. That whole scene is just really moved me and entertained me in a way that it kind of hadn't before. Good movies do that. Good art does that. And that's what, The Last Jedi is. It's really, really good art. Even with all of its controversy, and all of the divisions within the fandom. And look, Mark Hamill's right, and so is Rian Johnson. It's just the people that have a megaphone. It's not the majority of individuals. The movie didn't do as well as The Force Awakens because it wasn't The Force Awakens. It was the Last Jedi. You know, there are people who went to The Force Awakens just because it was a Star Wars movie. They probably and obviously didn't go back and see The Last Jedi because they didn't really care. Or they weren't drawn to the trailers. But it still did an amazing job at the box office. And you watch, Episode 9 under J.J. Abrams is going to be exponentially more successful, in my opinion, because of all the controversy of The Last Jedi than if The Last Jedi had just been a universally just good movie. Because I don't think you can be a great movie without having part of the fandom not like it, right? Because if a part of the fandom doesn't like it, then that means the part of the fandom that does like it, there's a lot of people like myself and you that are really, really passionate about it. All right, let's get to listener feedback.
I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now.
Yes, that's right. Raw strength in the in the power that you have to write me on Twitter and to talkshownerd@gmail.com. Jana Kolka, who said, thanks for reading her comment last week, even though I didn't get her name right. I don't think she bothered to tell me how to pronounce it right. So I'm going with Jana, and we're going with Kolka. Okay. All right, responding to last week's You're Nothing But Not to Me. Yes, absolutely. It guts me every time, too. Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver have such an intense electric chemistry together on screen, and it's crazy how Rian Johnson was able to build such an intimacy between them in order to make that line so impactful. And on that note, I'll be absolutely devastated if Ben Solo dies for the sake of redemption. How is that balance if he dies anyway? I don't want him to be Darth Vader. I want him to be the difference. I feel like him dying is just a cheap, easy way out, and in no way links the saga movies together in any way. So, Jana, thanks for the comment. And to that intimacy, how do I want to word this? We are so, in my opinion, we live in such a overly sexualized society, right? I appreciate that moment in that movie of Rian Johnson being able to put two fingers coming together and make it such an intimate moment. In a world where we're surrounded by sex and the intimacy of it and how unique and special it is really, really diluted. The innocence in the Star Wars movies and what he was able to do there, I just really, really appreciate that. And I don't want to get into pondering how big of a difference it makes or what it says to young people. I don't know if it does or not. I just know that I appreciate it. That the fact that there was more intimacy and emotion in that single scene than a lot of full-on, say, sex scenes that you'll see, like in Game of Thrones. Like, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. I like Game of Thrones a lot. And I'm no prude. I probably said this before, so I probably say it so much it sounds like I am, but I'm not. I'm no prude by any stretch of the imagination. But that being said, I don't need to see all that on screen. Especially when there's no weight behind it. I get some of the graphic nature and the sex scenes in some of Game of Thrones for the sake of the story. But for the scenes that are supposed to be intimate, it just doesn't have the same kind of gravity and weight to it. The one exception I'll give you, and even then I don't even think what they did on screen was necessary, nor was it all that graphic either. But at the very, very end of the last episode, before this most recent break, with Daenerys and Jon Snow, right, with Khaleesi. I love that, by the way. I was so hoping they would get together, despite despite their actual relationship. But that was very impactful. But even then, you didn't need to go full in to show everything in order to make that point. All right, I'm deviating there. That was just my way of saying, yes, that intimacy between them and finger-touching. Rian Johnson did a fantastic job of making that something that was very, very emotional. Jennifer Oliver writes this, meaningful, both this podcast and the use of that word. Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate what you're creating every week and always look forward to it. Let's see. Yes, at this point, he's saying something to her in order to have something meaningful with her. And by saying this, makes himself vulnerable. This is, again, to last week's You're Nothing But Not To Me. Every woman knows that once a man makes himself at all vulnerable for her, that he is hers. Did Ray make herself vulnerable for him? Ray stuck out her neck by initiating the hand contact and, of course, dolling herself up and showing up at his door, risking her life to save the resistance, sure, but also to save Ben Solo. But did she do all that for him, or was it for the resistance? I don't think he knows for sure. I don't think she knows for sure. I'm adding that part. I don't think she knows for sure. But he still thought it was worth it to really put himself out there. And that is what I love about that scene. Now, that he calls her nothing, I hate that. I hate that she calls herself a nobody to Maz and Luke. It's pitiful, but it seems that her getting some self-esteem and self-worth are part of her character arc in this trilogy. I'm sort of glad she didn't join him, if for no other reason than not to go off with the guy who just called her nothing. That being said, after he says, but not to me, and she says nothing back, he still says, join me, please, in such a way that I felt nothing but empathy for him. I have forgotten that he killed Han, but before Ben Solo was my favorite Star Wars character, and I'm rooting for this guy. How did Rian Johnson do that? Ben is offering Rey the most valuable thing he has in that moment, rulership of the whole galaxy. That is also what women look for when wondering if their man is committed to her. Does he want to share with me, or am I just an accessory? So despite the nobody, nothing thing, I think he made himself completely vulnerable to her and wanted to share the best. I will make this one point, though, Jennifer, to what you said about how he called her nothing. I think it's interesting that before he says that, he says, you have no part in this story. You're nothing. He talks about his parents, right? They sold you off for drinking money. They're dead in a pauper's grave in the Jakku desert, right? You have no part to play in this story. You're nobody. You're nothing. But not to me. That's the part of it that kind of changed the harshness of the you're nothing, was the sort of qualifier of you have no part to play in this story. And as a matter of fact, hang on one second. I was trying to find I had the clip available. I don't have it posted up in my production studio anymore. So I was going to actually play the clip from the movie. But for the sake of time, let's go ahead and move on to the next listener comment. Normal Girl CVCO writes this: I read somewhere an extract of Rey's survival guide, which she said the people of Jakku Village, something about the people of Jakku Village was fishy, and not even her dare walk by them. I don't remember very well, but I think it's interesting they decided to include that detail. I mean, it's bad Kylo gave the order to kill all of them. Maybe Lucasfilm were trying to say that they weren't that innocent. And, of course, going to the I think what she's speaking to there is the wiping out of the Jedi Temple. Let's see. Oh, JG writes, ha, 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 fanboy tears. Love that comment. That was a comment I made last week about Luke drinking the space cow milk. It was like drinking down fanboy tears. All right, let's see. Teeny243 says this. Always glad to find channels talking respectively and positively about Rian Johnson's wonderful movie. As for it being a love letter to the fans a couple episodes ago, yes, that's the way I see it too. I just recently got into thinking that way, and there's some other videos out there discussing it, but now I can't shake the idea that both Kylo and Rey could be read as representing different parts of the Star Wars fandom. There is the young white male fan in his room full of Star Wars memorabilia, a self-built lightsaber, and his Darth Vader cosplay costume on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have a young woman who clearly loves and values that all Star Wars has to say without obsessing over it. She even has her own collection of action figures, singular, I guess, and later even comes into the possession of a true lightsaber. I'm completely deluded Am I completely deluded that if you look at it that way, the killing of Han Solo can be seen as the angry mob of fans sort of killing the father and killing the creator of Star Wars, saying that he was a disappointment, foolish, and weak because he didn't live up to their expectations? Look, art imitates life, and that's what's happened here with this movie, with what Rian Johnson's created. Art's just imitated life, and the movies that George Lucas made, both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, were all very reflective of society in and around them. I don't think Rian Johnson intended to go and create a story that would be mimicking what the fandom and how they would react. There was no way for him to know that. He didn't even know what the response was going to be off of The Force Awakens, because he was writing it in the middle of when The Force Awakens was in production. However, when you look at what The Force Awakens set up with the characters in and of themselves, it lent itself to, obviously, to what Rian Johnson created, and that in turn is reflective of society. So I'm not surprised about that at all. We're talking about two opposing sides, right? Yin and yang, left versus right. It's easy to go and draw those comparisons when you're talking about two different things that are the opposites of one another, but both exist within the same universe and potentially could both be fighting for the same thing. I'm talking about Star Wars, Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, and Rey, and I'm also talking about the Star Wars fandom. So it's easy to see how those two would overlap and mirror each other. Let's see. Claudia writes this: I love you for existing. I love you for your podcasts. I love you for how you think. Wow. Claudia, I love you for your comment. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. IMR writes this: listening to you say that you wish Anakin and Padme's relationship was done better made me think that I'm happy it wasn't. Knowing how it ended, it would have been too heartbreaking. I think it was supposed to be awkward and cringy and followed and flowed from the start. Or I think she meant to say, my bad. I think they meant to say, IMR meant to say flawed from the start. That also gives me hope that both Ben and Rey will live. Otherwise, it would be devastating after being so emotionally invested in them. That's an interesting point. If you watch the prequels through the lens of which George Lucas was shooting it, in the type of style of filmmaking and what it was reflective of, a sort of 40s and 50s dialogue, it absolutely works. Look, and Hayden Christensen was a real person, is a real person. He is an actor. He is giving his portrayal of the words that were written on the page. And I say all that to mean, yeah, kids say stupid stuff. Adults say stupid stuff, for crying out loud. I wish I could wish away my feelings. Yeah, a stupid teenager to a girl he loves that's dressed in an outfit like that. Not putting any even on Padme. I'm just saying she looked beautiful in that scene. I'd be all sort of flustered as well in trying to convince this woman to love me in that moment, in that outfit with the fire going. So yeah, I'd probably say something stupid too. And I'm just as bad an actor. I'm not saying that Hayden Christensen is an actor. You all know what I'm talking about. All right. Julia Yashaka. I think I said it. Yashka. My bad, Julia. I'm sorry. You've always been so nice in sending messages, and I just butchered your name. My apologies. Julie Yashka. God, my bad. My real last name's Lo Judice, for crying out loud. That's why I go by Justice. So there you go. I also love this moment of nothing, but not to me. Especially if you think about how similar and parallel Kylo and Rey are. Ben is everything in the world of Star Wars. He is a Skywalker, son of Princess Leia, grandson of Darth Vader, a super powerful Force user, but in a way, he has nothing. No family, no friends, no master. Kylo is the leader of the freaking galaxy now, but he still is unhappy. And here we have Rey, who's always described herself as no one from nowhere, with parents who abandoned her, but still there is so much love and compassion and hope in Rey, and she's surrounded by the people who love her, but she is still lonely. The amount of thought that went into both of these characters and their relationship is amazing and beautiful, and I do hope that by the end of this trilogy, Ben and Rey will find happiness and belongings with each other. Considering that some of Luke's students, Julie adds, joined Kylo, and later they probably became the Knights of Ren, I think it's safe to say that it wasn't Kylo who killed all the opposite Padawans. Yeah, probably not him by himself. I tend to agree with that. Let's see. Misconduct 1 says this. I love the proposal from Kylo as well, but not as much as I love Rey's response to the proposal. I was happy she didn't take his hand. Yes, he said, but not to me. But the fact that he was just looking down on her, calling her a nothing, doesn't go away just because he said that. Kylo needs to learn how to talk to women, LOL. This proposal was very reminiscent of this, though, and a lot of people compared this proposal to, and I've heard this as well, Mr. Darcy's proposal in Pride and Prejudice. I think it's very much the same idea. Rey should be grateful Ben wants her, and that she means something to him, while at the same time he thinks that she's beneath him? I don't think so. It was ripping my heart out when he was saying the things to her. But I was rejoicing when she went for the saber, LOL. Good for Rey. She needs to make Ben earn it. He has to set things right and see her for who she is, regardless of her background, and she is definitely not nothing in the galaxy. She's extremely important, not just to him, but to the entire story. Let's see. Sky Thraki? Am I getting that right? No, I'm probably not going to say Sky Drathic. Boy, I'm butchering names left and right of the show this week. Hey, I'm new. Okay. So yeah, the physical copy, of course. Nothing is better than holding the movie in your own hands. Again, in response to last week, I'm very looking forward to Rian Johnson's trilogy because I hope there will not simply be the big bad troops and the one big bad guy. I think this might be very interesting and just finally start a new story. You're nothing but not to me. I think this line fits his character perfectly. I agree with all of your ideas, but the one thing I can't help but criticize is Rey and Kylo becoming a couple because, now look, if we expect Rey and Kylo to get married and have children only for the sake of the Skywalker lineage to carry on, something is wrong with us. And I believe this could become the reason for Lucasfilm not to do it. All of us want the lineage to continue, but most of us don't. Most of us want Reylo, but saying it has to happen for this lineage, so the lineage doesn't die, this is wrong. By stating that both Kylo and Rey are the only tools, and this is not a good way to verifying the true and big meaning behind the good and bad becoming one. I don't need to see the Skywalker lineage carried on. Let me make that perfectly clear. I think that it's okay for it to end in 9. My only point on the Skywalker lineage is with the redemption of Ben Solo. If Ben Solo's not redeemed, Kylo Ren's not redeemed, again, it makes the killing of Han Solo irrelevant and kind of pointless, and 2, it really makes the Skywalker tale, apart from Luke, kind of sad and tragic. And even with Luke, kind of sad and tragic. I love what Rian Johnson did with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. He really brought it through right at the end. But let's not forget that in those final years, set up by J.J. Abrams, not Rian Johnson, and also was George Lucas was going to do the same thing. His last, decade or more of years weren't exactly the greatest. So if Ben Solo isn't redeemed in some way, shape, or form, or there isn't good closure on the Skywalker lineage bringing the entire galaxy peace, then I think we've got a problem. I don't need to see the Skywalker lineage continue after 9. I believe that can end there. It doesn't mean that I don't want to see Ben and Rey together. I'm open to whatever they're going to do. But when it comes to the Skywalker name living on, it's okay in my book if it doesn't. Let's see. Let's go. Edwin writes in, real quick question. Do you think when the Blu-ray comes out, people will be more positive than the first reactions? I don't know. It depends on if the movie grows on people. I think it's been growing on people in more of a positive way than growing on people in a negative way. And I've certainly heard people who said after multiple viewings that they've appreciated it more. So I would hope that would be the case. But time will tell when it comes to whether or not that actually happens. Megan Hendricks writes this. You mentioned Kylo Ben having killed the children like Anakin had. We're told this by Luke, though, who wasn't a witness, saw the aftermath of whatever happened. I wondered if Ben, unlike Anakin, was defending himself. Maybe he tried pleading his case only to have more people turn on him because they don't believe him. Or what if Snoke had come or sent someone to pick him up and things escalated? Either way, I think there's still more to learn from that, right? Yeah, perhaps. I'm kind of just going off of what we've seen on screen. And right now what the assumption is, and the assumption is that when Luke and Ben Solo had that confrontation in the hut, Ben grabbed a few of the students, slaughtered the rest, and left. That's what Luke said, and unless they tell us differently, that's currently what the story is yielding. But even with that, there's still a possibility to have Ben Solo return fully, Kylo Ren redeemed, especially if you take in he was being seduced by Snoke, part of the dark side. Okay. I'm moving quickly because I have one more comment here, and I'm just out of time. On to Vesuvi writes this. Thanks, John. Keep up the great work. So glad to discover your podcast and videos. I love The Last Jedi, too. I love the director and the Jedi and all the deleted scenes and bonus features. Cheers to Rian Johnson and all of the creators involved in making this wondrous, complex middle chapter to the current trilogy. I purchased the movie thrice. Once on Blu-ray for myself, another Blu-ray for a dear friend, and a DVD for my mother, who shares Star Wars appreciation with my nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and grandnephew. You need to get your mother a Blu-ray player. That's what I'm saying. I was also fortunate enough to experience The Last Jedi at the premiere event in Chicago Cinema and several cinematic visits after that. Yep, I'm an enthusiast. May the Force be with us all. What a perfect way to wrap up the show this week. All right, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think about whether or not we should split the show up. As I mentioned at the first half of the show, if we should split it up into two different podcasts, one nothing but listener reaction, and the other one just news and commentary. I'm personally kind of leaning to keeping it all one show and just having it be a little longer than the 45 minutes like this week, but I'm totally open to any ideas that you might have about the future of the show, which I am planning on growing, and that's mostly because of you and your response to the show. I can't tell you how appreciative I am that you check it out every single week. And for everybody that comments and doesn't comment, thank you so much for traveling to that galaxy far, far away with every single show. Let's see. iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube, iHeartRadio app is all the places you can find the show. If you watch it on iTunes or listen on iTunes, please subscribe. Same thing with the YouTube channel. Leave a comment as always. You can email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Jon Jon Justice, and on Twitter, Jon Jon Justice. Let's see, did I miss anything else? Nope, I think that's it. Looking forward to next week. Maybe we'll have some Solo, a Star Wars story news to share with you. And one more quick point, non-Star Wars related, but if you have not gone out and seen Ready Player One, do yourself a favor and rush to your local cinema to see it. I absolutely love that movie. Artemis is my spirit animal. I've seen it 3 times already because I'm that big of a nerd. Thank you for checking out My Nerd World, and I will talk to you again next week.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.